Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this new episode of the Numbers Podcast. Philippe, how are you doing? We saw each other yesterday.
That's right. We had lunch. I'm in Ottawa. This is my quarterly visit to Ottawa, or as I say, my trimestrial visit to Ottawa, where I come to meet journalists and some staff, and sometimes MPs. But they're not sitting this week, so it's been a bit quieter. But yeah, and we saw each other last yesterday. And you are even lovelier in person than you are in the airwaves. So it was great to see you, Eric.
Yes, it was a lot of fun, and we're both in Ottawa. You're actually not that far from me, but it just makes more sense actually to do it this way,
Yeah.
because otherwise we'd be awkwardly sitting on a couch between two ferns, probably. So why don't we get right into this? We got so much stuff to get to
Oh,
today
we
because
a ton.
there's
Yep.
elections in a few days.
Yep.
We're going to do live streams from both British Columbia and New Brunswick on Sunday and or Saturday and Monday. It'll be Sunday morning for BC. So join us. You can find that on the YouTube. But anyway, we got that going on, and also there's what's this Palace Coup in Ottawa? Maybe is that why you're there? Are you
No,
behind it?
this is a complete coincidence. I reject any correlations, or this is no. There's
Suspicious.
I have I'm not involved in that at all. But it was interesting, that story, how it emerged while the prime minister was in Asia, like as far as possible from Parliament Hill. And now we have bombshells at the Hogue inquiry, and yeah, I'm not sure what to make of all this. This is not my beat. I'm not a legal expert, but politically, we're in for a very very busy fall, and I think there are many twists and turns that we can't foresee right now.
So we'll start, I think, with the federal kind of story. Uh, so if you haven't heard it already, it is the that it came out over last weekend that there are a number of Liberal MPs, could be upwards of 20 or 30, who either have signed a letter or there is a document spreading
Yeah.
around with some names on it. Not exactly clear what it is. That is going to call for Justin Trudeau to give up the leadership. And we've heard just over the last few days that on the caucus meeting on Wednesday, there will actually be made that proposal to Justin Trudeau at the meeting. I find the telegraphing of it a few days out odd. It's not going to come as a big shock when someone stands up in the middle of that caucus and says,
Yeah.
"You know what I'm going to say? Time
Yeah.
for you to go." Like at least Justin Trudeau has some time to think about it, what he's going to say. The reason behind it, I mean, there's no mystery, right? We got three polls that came out over the last week or so.
Yeah.
Campaign research had 41 for the Conservatives, 24 for the Liberals, 17 for the NDP. Abacus, 43 for the Conservatives, 22 for the Liberals, 19 for the NDP. And Nanos, 39 for the Conservatives, 23 for the Liberals, 21 for the NDP. They're 20 points back in most of these polls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Two-thirds of these MPs are looking at defeat. I kind of get that they might be trying to push Justin Trudeau out the door.
And I mean, Eric, we've been talking about this for almost a year now. They at some point, a caucus, any caucus of any party, has to grow a backbone when things aren't going right. I mean, you would think that we live in a system that was, I think it was at first designed to be bottom up and not top down. And we know that as time went by, the PMO and had more and more power over the caucus, and MPs that were not part of cabinet were basically just points in the House to be counted on when there's a vote. But MPs should have a great say on how government and parliament is conducted. And so I'm glad to see this. I think it's a bit late. Um, Maybe this won't push Trudeau out the door, but at least it's something, right? At least there's a pulse, and I think that's been missing for the past. A year is maybe too much, but maybe 8 months, where things really haven't been going well, and the Conservatives have taken all the airwaves and all the space to take the narrative. But yeah, some pushback from Liberal MPs. I'm not sure how it's going to end.
No.
Basically, it's not definitive. Those who say they know, oh yeah, Trudeau will have to come down. Well, we said that many times. Trudeau has 9 lives. He's a cat there. So we might have another one coming. But the numbers have not getting a bit better. Like what you just, the polls you just quoted, are basically continuation of what we've seen.
Yeah.
There's maybe, and I want to ask you this, Eric, there's maybe one number from Abacus that had Pierre Poilievre's favorability going down. And the
Yeah.
movement was not great, but it was outside of the estimated margin of error. Like many Canadians outside of the conservative base really don't like Pierre Poilievre, but he's leading by 20 points. And so you would think that a liberal leader should be able to take that on, and it looks like Monsieur Trudeau is not that leader.
Well, the numbers from Abacus had Pierre Poilievre's negatives up to 40%. The last time it was at 40% was in June 2023, so that's a long time ago. And it's gone up by 5 points since mid-September.
Yeah,
That is kind of significant because if you look at the trend line, he's been at 36 to 34%, 37% for pretty much for all of 2024. So for him to suddenly jump to 40 could be a blip, who knows? But it is something that maybe the Liberals have been looking for. I'm not sure it's enough because you said they're up 20 points. There's a good reason for that.
yeah,
These numbers are still the best ones, right?
yeah,
Pierre Poilievre is -1 because
yep.
his positives are 39. But then when you look at Jagmeet Singh, what's his numbers? He's now -11. His
Mm-hmm.
negatives have shot up. And Trudeau is, let's see, I got to
Like
scroll
minus
down.
30,
He's -36.
30.
So -1 looks pretty good. Looks pretty good compared to those. So yeah, that's also my question here. Like the people who are hoping for Justin Trudeau to take this time to resign, people say there's not a lot of time. There isn't a lot of time. You can still organize a leadership race. I still always remember what happened in Ontario with the PCs.
Oh my
Patrick
God.
Brown
Yeah.
resigns in a well, I don't know what to call it. It was something
A
um,
story. Yeah.
in mid-January. By June, Doug Ford is premier. Like you can do
and,
that
and
kind of thing.
yeah, and Ford won the leadership. Wasn't it March 10th or something?
March.
It was two. It
It's
was
less
like
than
2 months.
3 months.
That's
Less than
amazing.
3 months between
Yeah.
the leadership race and the actual vote. But I guess my question is, will things change? Is Trudeau the problem for the Liberals?
Yeah.
Or is the Liberals, are they kind of cooked anyway? No matter who it is, they're going to end up at 20 to 25% of the vote because that's where people are when it comes to the Liberal Party.
I think that's a really good question, Eric. But we are in the numbers business,
Yeah.
and there's cooked and there's completely burnt, right? The liberals are not at the level of the Kim Campbell PCs in the 93 election. This is not what we see. There's still a liberal base. It's weakened, but we still see bad polls have them in the low 20s. We had one odd poll from Main Street Research that had the liberals at 19. It doesn't seem to be a trend. Um, so the liberals, I think the numbers show that they're done, but they're not decimated yet. But Trudeau pulls them down, and so maybe the thing is there's no Poilievre mania. I think we can state that. I mean, yeah, you're right. The -1 looks good next to a -36. But it still shows that, I mean, we will talk about provincial numbers. Favorabilities don't have to be all in the negative, right? And Monsieur Eby is in a positive in BC. Scott Moe and Carla Beck both are in a positive in favorability ratings in Saskatchewan. So there's no Poilievre mania, but the Liberals, the brand and the leader is pushing the party down.
Yeah, I think at this point, you might as well try something.
Yeah.
Maybe whoever replaces him does worse. Maybe the turmoil that a leadership race causes more damage to the Liberals. But maybe they get a bit of a bump too. Maybe things improve for them. There's talk of actually probably the first major figure to actually say they would run for the leadership, which was Christy Clark, the former BC premier. I don't know if what her potential is, to hold on to the Liberal vote in Quebec, things like that. But that would
Yeah.
definitely shake things up. And
Yeah.
if Christy Clark became leader of the federal Liberal Party, don't ask me to predict where the polls are 3 months after that because I have no idea. I have no idea. So I can
Yeah.
imagine that if you're sitting in that caucus, you're looking at projections from, 338 Canada, something
Yeah.
like that, showing that your chances of winning are less than 1% in your seat. Uh, You might as well just take a roll of the dice because less than 1%. Because I think that no matter what, neither of us would ever say anything's 100%.
Yeah.
You might as well try something. So we'll see if it's going to work. I'm not sure. It all depends how many people I think stand up on Wednesday, if that's when it's going to take place.
If we take a base, just the numbers in 2021, I had 178 seats that were labeled safe seats on election day, and I had the right winner in 177 of them. There was only one safe seat that I got wrong, and everybody got wrong. It was Richmond Center. Liberals won it, and it was projected conservative. There were no local polls. But if you make a little calculation, that's 0.6%. So it's once out of almost 200 cases. So all these Liberal MPs that are looking at the projections that see their odds of winning are less than 1%. Yeah, you may win the lottery and win, but there won't be many of you. So it's yeah.
We'll see what happens. We'll see if this could be a heck of a next few months.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Oh
yeah,
boy.
if Trudeau is pushed out, there's, I mean, there's been talk of prorogation, and I think it's we talked about this in a previous podcast. I think it's something that analysts like to mention, but it's rarely a tool that is rarely used, and it doesn't really serve a big purpose outside of resetting. And the Liberals don't need a reset; they need a reboot, right? If
Unplug
there's
and replug in, right?
well, that's the thing. If they change leaders, that would be the only excusable reason to have a prorogation, and then those months are not going to be quiet. So yeah, it could be very eventful. Looking forward to it.
Speaking of eventful and looking forward to things, a late night podcast or live stream for us because we're out here on the east. Well, we're in central Canada, I suppose. So British Columbia is going to the polls on Saturday. They've
That's
been
right.
going to elections on Saturdays for now. This will be the second one, and it'll start at 11 o'clock Eastern time, and a more reasonable 8 o'clock Pacific. But we'll be streaming the results, and it
Huh.
seems like an NDP win. Maybe.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about it?
Okay, so I think we can state the obvious here. There's an elephant in the room, as we say. Okay, so Main Street Research has had a rolling poll. And in the last, 25 days or so, they have polled every day British Columbians. I think it sums up to about 11,000 cases throughout the month. So it's a big number, and they had a tie. Even in the very beginning, they had even a small NDP lead. But for the last second half, let's say, of the election, Main Street has showed consistently the Conservatives ahead. Um, and nobody else see that. Like we had Research Co. It's a local pollster based in Vancouver. We had the Angus Reid Institute, also based in Vancouver. We had Polara, we had Palace Data, we had Ipsos, we had Leger. We're waiting for final numbers from many of those firms. But as we speak this morning, all of these firms see either a small lead for the NDP or a 5 to 6 point lead for the NDP. And so how do you square that circle or circle that square? How do you say that? Anyway,
Yeah,
so
square that circle. Yeah,
how do you square
square
that
it.
circle? I mean, it's not. I mean, to be fair, obviously seeing an NDP +4 or a Conservative +4 is wildly different, especially in the seat projections.
Hmm.
But we have Main Street that has the NDP at 40. We have other firms that have the NDP at 45. If it comes up NDP at 43, well, everybody's close. Like we have to
Yeah.
be careful, and I don't think there should be a mob outside of a pollster's house saying, "How dare you being wrong?" Because they could all be sort of right. But when we do our projections, we do a weighted average, and obviously we have one pollster that's different from the others that has to factor in. They have the largest sample of all the firms. Um, but nevertheless, I mean, you look at the numbers for older voters, voters in Vancouver Island, and also the numbers in the interior have not been that bad for the NDP. So I feel like this is an NDP win, a short NDP win, but we're doing this on Thursday morning, and we will have the final polls. This could flip at It's very, very close. What do you make of the final numbers that we saw so far?
Yeah,
The most
it's
recent numbers, should I say? Yeah.
yeah, the most recent ones. If you just pull like from the pollsters that have been out in the last few days, and as you're listening to this, there are undoubtedly new numbers. So you can take a look at the Wikipedia page, Polling Canada 338 to find out what the latest numbers
338, it's
are.
the
But
best one. Yeah.
yeah, 338. Yeah, right. That's the one. But you're going to be on a you got to travel back from Ottawa. You're going to be out of date. Um, for the Conservatives, in all the polls except Main Street, they're between 39 and 41%. So that's pretty clear. Main Street had them 44 in their last one.
Yeah.
They'll have a new one out probably this morning, so it could be a bit different. For the NDP, there's a little bit less consensus because most of the polls have them at 45 or 46. There's a couple that have them at 42, and Main Street has them at 40. Those are very close numbers.
Yeah.
When you have that issue with the turnout, as you mentioned, I think that gives the NDP the edge overall because in most of the polls, really all of the polls, the NDP has a lead among older voters, and sometimes it's a big lead. It's like a double-digit lead.
Yeah.
So even if you have some of these polls like Palace or Polera where the gap isn't too big, it's 2-3 points, you're probably giving a boost of a couple points to the NDP anyway. And like you said, they have decent numbers in the interior, so they'll win some seats there. They're leading in Vancouver, so they'll Vancouver Island, so they'll win most of the seats there. And in most polls, they're doing pretty well in the Lower Mainland, so they're likely to win 2/3 of the seats there as well. That adds up to an NDP win. But I'm not like we're both in both of our projections. We have the NDP winning a majority government of a few seats. But then when you look at the ranges, there is an overlap between the NDP and the Conservatives. So we're not ruling out the possibility of a Conservative win.
Oh, no.
And I was there in 2013. I wasn't there in BC, but there mentally, I was making projections for the BC election in 2013. So I'm always very skittish about these kinds of things. And when the polls are often wrong, it's because the Conservatives have been underestimated. So that's what always makes me nervous when you have a small lead for the non-Conservative party.
Listen, if you look at 338 right now, as of this morning, 25% odds for the Conservatives to win the most seats. This is not, they're not the favorites, but nobody in their right mind can say that 25% is negligible. It's not. Yeah. It's 1 in 4.
No,
it's huge. It can happen. It can you throw a coin, get the heads twice in a row, and then that's it. That's 25%. It's just that everything would have to fall in place. Right? And there's also a good chance if the Conservatives somehow have a really good and efficient vote, they could lose the popular vote and win a majority maybe by 1 or like get to 47 on the nose, 47 seats, which is the threshold, the new threshold. The NDP has a higher ceiling as well. I mean, I would not be surprised either to see the NDP win 55 seats, right? And then on election night, we go like, oh, it wasn't that close in the end. But in the popular vote, in the vote distribution, it would have been close, but it's also possible that all these close toss-ups, the NDP takes all of them. And it turns out that maybe it wasn't that close, but it's been a very interesting campaign. And I think I have to say, I mean, I live in Montreal. I've been to BC twice. I visited Vancouver and around Vancouver. British Columbia is always an enigma to me. Like, I read the news from there, and sometimes it feels foreign, right? And it's not their fault. It's my fault. But no. I really enjoyed following this campaign. I learned a lot about BC. I learned a lot about BC voters. And, Richard Zussman, which you had on your other podcast, does great work following the campaign. I must say I learned a lot. And dear BC listeners, I'm looking forward to visit your province again and talk to the political class over there because I learned a lot. So I wanted to state this. I know it's not numbers related, but I want to state this. Looking forward to my next visit for sure.
Okay, we're going to do a little draft later on, so we'll talk a little bit more about BC in a minute. Saskatchewan is going to the polls on October 28th, so not this coming Monday, but the next Monday. And we finally got a poll. Out of Saskatchewan.
And what a surprise. What a surprise.
It's a special poll. Right. So this poll was commissioned by QB Saskatchewan. so the union out there. So do need to take that into account. But it was conducted by Janet Brown. Janet
That's right.
Brown is a pollster out in Alberta, and she has a very impressive track record in Alberta, particularly because she has been often able to capture the conservative vote in Alberta when other pollsters haven't. So
100%. Yeah.
it's not that, in the last couple campaigns, other pollsters are saying the NDP was going to win, although a couple I think actually did.
Some
But
did. Yeah.
it's that she wasn't underestimating UCP support out in Alberta, which I think is always a little bit of a concern when we're talking about the prairies. We saw in the federal election, conservatives were really underestimated in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So she did this poll in Saskatchewan, so it was nice to see that. And she doesn't have results that are all that different from everybody else. 45% for the Saskatchewan Party, 40% for
Yeah.
the NDP. It's only a 5-point gap
I
in a
know.
province that the Sask Party won by what, 28 points, 29 points last
Yeah.
time?
29. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not good enough when you look at the regional numbers for the NDP to actually hope to win this, but this is still pretty close for Saskatchewan, gotta say.
Yes, very interesting. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. I know thank you, QP, for commissioning this poll because nobody else's did. I mean, what polls have we had from Saskatchewan? We had one Research Co and one Main Street. Oh, yeah, English Street also, English Street, right?
Well, this
But
is actually the first poll that's been published and conducted, at least partially, I think,
in the
since
writ,
the writ drop.
yeah.
It's
So
insane.
yeah, I know. I mean, the thing is, BC is taking all the oxygen, but let's
Oh, wait,
focus
no,
on
sorry,
Saskatchewan
I
right now.
shouldn't say that. Correct myself. Research Co. came out with a poll recently as well.
Last week, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So, 5 point lead for the Sask Party is a close election, but not in seats. Like, I think I have still 40 seats for the Sask Party,
Yeah.
or 39 maybe. It's interesting to see the regional breakdown. It's just we have to be careful. This is a phone poll with a real margin of error, and the regional breakdown. I think there's 160 cases in the cities and then 300 in the regions. The NDP is getting slaughtered in the regions. It's 30-point advantage for the Sask Party. So when we drew up, Éric, when we drew up a roadmap to victory for the NDP, it included places like Moose Jaw and Prince Albert. Those numbers say it's not happening, right?
Yeah, why
Maybe
not?
there are local effects, good local candidate, but if we just look coldly at the numbers, this is not happening. But 67% of support for the NDP in Regina, in the capital. We said that the NDP needed a sweep of
57,
Regina.
57, 57.
57? Oh,
Yeah.
57. Sorry. Oh, I typed wrong. But still, it's still a big lead.
Oh, yeah. No. 57 is still a lot.
Yeah, it's a big lead for the NDP. This could be an almost sweep. It's just that in the city. It's just that the map is so cruel to the NDP in Saskatchewan because that's not enough. But also very small support for the other parties. This is not a surprise, but there's the Saskatchewan United, there's the PC, there's the Buffalo, there's the Greens. They all have 1 or 2% apiece, which suggests that there won't be a surprise third party win anywhere. But what did you make of those numbers from Janet Brown?
I was really curious to see this because of the fact that Janet Brown does her polls in that different way with the telephone. So it's not about online panels having difficulty finding conservative voters in rural areas. You do find that she had lower support for the NDP in the rural areas than you see in some of the online polls. So that does make sense. She only had him at 26%. But yeah, the 27-point lead in Regina is probably enough to win nearly all the seats.
Nearly, yeah.
11-point lead in Saskatoon is good as well for doing that. But she also had breakdown by urban, suburban, and rural. So rural we know is bad for the NDP, 64-21 for the Sask Party. But it was a 7-point lead in the urban areas, but only 6-point lead in the suburban areas. So
Yeah.
the fact that they're up by 6 points in the suburbs mean they are probably going to win a lot of those outlying seats in Saskatoon and Regina. But it probably also means that there might be a couple holdouts. Some of those really tough ones that are just at the edges,
Yeah.
where the Sask Party vote was 60% or plus last time. I think that is the biggest problem for them. That it isn't that they can win all but 1 or 2 seats in Saskatoon and Regina. They need to win every single one.
All of them. Right.
Maybe they can not win one out of the two seats if they sweep both Moose Jaw and Prince Albert, but it's just the map is so narrow. And
Yeah.
then once they get to 31 seats, that's kind of it. There's it's hard to find a 32nd. So if
Yeah.
they don't win one of their target seats, that's kind of it for them. They're not even going to have a chance to win. So it's going to be closer. A lot of Sask Party MLAs are going to be out of job on October 29th, but I don't think Scott Moe will be. I think he'll still be the premier.
Well, we have to say this though, regardless of, Janet Brown, we know, she's an A+ pollster in my rating.
Yeah,
She's
she's like the
nailed every
seltzer
Alberta.
in Iowa.
Yeah, she's exactly. That's a good analogy. But we also cannot just ignore the fact that polls in 2020 in Saskatchewan all miss the mark with the NDP. They had the NDP between 35 and 40, and the NDP had, I think it was 31. And so, I'm not saying Janet Brown will follow that same path or that other pollsters haven't adjusted since,
Right.
but it's hard to ignore, right? So there could be a ballot box bonus for the Sash Party. And would you be surprised? In 2020, the final count was 48 to 13. Is that right? 48 to 13.
Yeah.
Could we see a 35-26, which would be a really close result? But we could also see like a 42-19. It's also possible that the NDP drops some close races. And also, I wanted to mention this, Éric. The age breakdown was very interesting because there's no generational like cleavage
Yeah,
between
that was
in the
unusual. Yeah,
numbers.
we've seen that in other polls.
Yeah. So young people and older people are not necessarily, like by wide margins, supporting one party or the other. It's I would say it's pretty uniform. So Janet Brown has, if you take the 25 to 44 years old. By the way, I object to this age breakdown. It puts me with 64-year-olds. I'm
Yeah, I'm with
45 now,
25-year-olds.
so
Sounds pretty good.
that's so. But support for the Sash Party from 25 to 44 is 40%. 45 to 64-year-old is 47, and above 65 years old is 50%. It's not a huge generational cleavage. And I know cleavage is not the right word. It's cleavage. Sorry,
No,
cleavage is
no, we
something
say
else
that.
in
We say
English.
that. That
It's
works.
good. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, lost in translation. But very interesting. I don't see a path to the NDP. I really don't. I think if they expect to win, they could be disappointed. But if they expect to have a bigger caucus, maybe even double their caucus from last time, then they could say, okay, this is a path to a future election when the Sask Party dynasty eventually will lose and will be there. But this time around, the numbers say I don't think it's happening.
So, dear listeners, if my microphone was bad just a minute ago, I'm very sorry. I had the wrong one on. Now it's better. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. I'll try to clean it up. If I haven't cleaned it up enough, my apologies. But now it should be nice and clear. So hello, and my apologies for that mistake. And if Philip didn't have a train to catch, we'd probably try to re-record. So let's move on to New Brunswick.
New Brunswick. Okay, so Éric, you got some new numbers for us. I did not see this before waking up this morning. So Narrative Research polled the 3 cities in New Brunswick. So why don't you go through the numbers for us?
So this was numbers from Narrative Research for the Brunswick News, so the Telegraph Journal, and probably the smaller papers that are across New Brunswick. And instead of polling the entire province, they decided to use the resources to only poll the 3 cities. We know that the North, the Francophone North, almost certainly going to be swept by the Liberals, and the Anglophone rural South almost certainly going to be swept by the Conservatives or the PCs. But what's going to happen in the 3 cities? These numbers are pretty good for the Liberals. We have a 1-point lead before the removing of the undecideds, because I couldn't see the numbers with the undecideds removed. I don't know if Narrative did that. But St. John, the Liberals had a 1-point lead in St. John, 27 to 26, with the Greens at 7. In Fredericton, it was a 5-point lead for the Liberals, 27 to 22, with the Greens at 14.
Only 14.
And in Moncton, a 12-point lead for the Liberals over the PCs. The Greens were at 9. That looks like a lot of gains for the Liberals in Moncton. It looks like probably a few gains in Fredericton, including Susan Holt, I would suspect.
Yeah.
And in St. John, probably a few pickups too. So that, if these numbers are accurate,
Yeah.
probably a Liberal win.
Okay, I'll say this. When Main Street Research released its poll in New Brunswick a few weeks ago, I remember seeing that St. John number. Main Street had like a statistical tie between the Liberals and the PCs. And I reached out to the folks at Main Street saying, the PCs in 2020 won the popular vote in St. John it was by 30 points. Right? They had over 60%. The PCs had over 60% of the vote. If you take the ridings that cover the city, I know there was been redistribution, but the PCs won 60% of the vote in St. John. And now we have two polls that have them tied with the Liberals. This is a massive, massive swing. If it materializes, if there's no hidden PC vote, but usually those hidden votes are just a handful of points. This is not only a Liberal win, but an easy Liberal win. Like, it would not be a 25 or 26 win. It could be like a 30-seat win. And so I'm going to have to go down, crunch these numbers over the weekend. I'm very glad to see that this is a good idea to poll the cities, since we have a good idea of where the rural areas will fall. But isn't that a really bad poll for the Greens, Éric?
Their only hope for winning seats in any of these cities is in Fredericton. So if the 14 that they have in Fredericton, which when you get rid of the undecideds, probably boosts them over to 20. If it's all concentrated in David Coon's riding, then that's fine. He'll get reelected. If it's spread out evenly across the city, then he probably won't be. That, I think, is really the big question. For the Liberals, if they can win Susan Holt's riding, that's one pickup that they need. There's the other riding, Fredericton North, that they could pick up. If the vote is spread in a bad way for the Liberals, then maybe they come up short in those. It all just depends on where this vote is. And that's particularly the case in St. John, with a 1-point lead for the Liberals. If a lot of that is concentrated in St. John Harbour in the kind of the core riding, but they come up short in the outlying seats in the rest of the city or in the suburbs of it, then they don't have as many pickups as that. So if it works out well to them, I agree. They could get up to 30 seats. If it is just an efficient vote, then maybe they are more in the 25 to 26 seat range. But that's all they need, because we also know that the Greens are likely to support the Liberals if they come up short, or let's say if they do win 25, 26 seats and someone resigns, they're not going to be toppled by a PC Green agreement on the other side. So these numbers do seem pretty good for the Liberals. We'll see what else is going to come out over the weekend, because I'm sure there'll be at least Main Street will probably come out with a final poll. We might see some other numbers. And so we'll get a little bit of a better idea if narrative is a one-off. But this does lead me to believe that the Liberals are in a much stronger position going into the campaign, going into Election Day on Monday.
Again, I mean, in St. John, this would be a 30-point swing. And not many parties can survive a 30-point swing in one of the main cities. The PCs, they won 27 seats last time around, so it was a victory. It was a clear victory, but that's still 2 seats above the threshold. If they lose 30 points in St. John's, there's no path. It's always good and fair to doubt polls. And it's not like narrative, let's be fair. Not like narrative has had a great record just before elections. I followed that. I mean, I'm glad to have them. They're the local pollsters over there, but I've been comparing their numbers to election results in past years, and it's not always on the nose. But I'm looking at this, and if you just give me those numbers and put them in ballot box, there's very little chance the PCs can hold on to power. So. Interesting.
All right, we're going to play a little game now, a little draft. So what we're going to do, we lined up the 10 different outcomes of the 3 elections. So you have NDP majority and minority in BC, Conservative majority minority in BC, Sask Party win NDP win in Saskatchewan, and majority minorities for either the Liberals or the PCs in New Brunswick. Now, yesterday when we were at lunch, we had a little coin flip. And so you won the coin toss. You get to decide. We're going to do a snake draft.
Okay.
So you get to decide if you want to go first or second since you won that coin toss.
Okay, so I think the safest number one pick of all the outcomes would be a Sask Party win in Saskatchewan. I think that's a safe pick. But we're doing a snake draft. So that means that if I yield the first pick, I have the second and third. And if I choose the correct second and third, then I win. So there's an advantage of being wise with your choice. And I mean, do I put my trust in narrative research? Because this poll right now tips the balance for me. So, Éric, I won the coin flip. I will yield the first pick to you.
All right. Well, I'm not going to overthink this. With the Janet Brown poll, who knows what could happen? It could end up being a surprise in Saskatchewan. But I think out of all of the options, the safest one to put in the bank and to at least give me one win would be the Sask Party majority. The map is just too difficult for the NDP. You almost start with them at 29 or 30 seats just from the rural areas. They're going to win at least one or two, I think, of the seats in Saskatoon and Regina, and that'll give them the win. I don't know if it'll be comfortable. Could be pretty close. Likely to be comfortable enough. So I'm going to go with the Sask Party majority as my first pick.
Okay. Well, which is funny because if we go by our last draft, the first picks did not materialize.
NDP is going to win a majority in Saskatchewan. That's what's going to happen.
Okay. So I get the second and third picks. So I will pick in the second round, or the second pick, an NDP majority in British Columbia. It could be a minority. It's possible. I think the Greens have had good numbers. It's hard to gauge as well because they don't have a candidate in a quarter of the seats, or maybe a fifth of the seats. But it's hard to gauge. But if the Greens win 3 seats, which is possible, then a minority also becomes plausible. But I think the NDP is going to win a majority. And for the third pick.
You can hedge. You could choose the conservative win in BC.
I could hedge. Or thing is, but since I think your first pick is the correct one, if I yield to you the winning formula, you won the last draft. So I want to have the bragging rights here. So I will put my trust in narrative research. Maybe it's unwise, but I'm going to pick a Susan Holt Liberal majority in New Brunswick.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I had that on my list, but obviously I have all of them on my list, but that one was lower on the list.
Oh.
I think I would put it higher now because of the narrative poll. But I think that it is still a pretty inefficient vote for the Liberals. The path is pretty narrow for them. I think the Greens do have a good possibility to win 2 or 3 seats, which in a legislature of, 49?
49, yeah.
Has a big potential for a minority government. So I'm going to say that it'll be a Liberal win in New Brunswick, but a minority. That's what I'm going to choose as my second pick. And now I get a third pick. So where do I go? I will go to BC again since I don't have a BC. A minority is just hard because the Greens are at most going to win 2 seats, right? Maybe 3.
Well, a third is not impossible, but I think that's the ceiling.
Yeah. I mean, some of the polls have been a little bit better for them at the tail end of the campaign. Sonia Furstenau, her numbers are quite good.
Yeah.
So I think that she might actually get, and we saw that riding poll, so maybe she might be able to win in Victoria Beacon Hill, and maybe they can win in Saanich. I don't know if they can win in West Vancouver, but
yeah,
it's just that if they get 2 seats, that means that the other parties need to be within 2 seats, and it's just hard to imagine that. So I think... Actually, you know what? I don't know enough. I feel more confident that it's going to be close in New Brunswick. So my third pick is I'm going back to the east, a PC minority in New Brunswick.
You take all the minorities in New Brunswick. Okay. I did not expect that. Okay. All right. So I'm taking what, 5th overall here? No, I'm taking, what are we at?
6.
Oh, so bad.
6 and 7. What do you got?
6 and 7. Okay. I will take the NDP minority in British Columbia.
Wow.
How
How does that play out?
It plays out that the numbers from Main Street Research are closer than than the average. The NDP and the Conservatives are almost in a tie, or maybe the Conservatives even have a small lead, and then you have like a 46 or 47 seats tally for the NDP, and it's the Greens that have to prop them up. There's also another scenario that we have that will not be drafted here. What do we do if it's tie? What do we do if it's 46-46-1 in BC? It's not impossible. It could happen. I mean, we could add those at the end if we want, but it's also New Brunswick. What do we do if it's a tie? Like, officially, if it's a tie, it's the incumbent that stays in power and tries to form a government. But yeah, so I'm not going to pick a tie because I think the odds are low, but it's not something to that it's negligible as well.
Yeah. Well, we can add a tie. We can add a BC tie and a New Brunswick tie to the list if we want.
So what did I just pick? NDP minority? Okay. Do I think a Conservative win, minority or majority, is more likely than a PC win in New Brunswick? Man, that narrative poll just throws me off. Okay. Wow, people in BC will really think I'm not down with the Conservatives if I take the PC option. How did the PCs lose 30 points in St. John? Okay, I'm going to take Conservative minority in BC.
Oh, okay. Minority in BC. All right, then. So I got 2 picks. So what's left on the board? I think we should add the ties to the board because I think that's a possibility. So we got a BC Conservative majority, the
PC majority.
PC majority, and Saskatchewan NDP majority, and
that's
ties.
Right. Yeah.
I think I'll pretty easily take a BC Conservative majority. Okay. I would not be surprised to see polls underestimate a Conservative Party. Maybe the NDP runs up the numbers too much in Vancouver and on Vancouver Island, and they lose too many close seats in some of the suburbs. So I think a BC Conservative majority is not as you said, it's not a negligible outcome. So I feel pretty comfortable taking that. And between the ties and I think the New Brunswick PCs could end up winning another majority. So I don't have any issue taking that one next because we do have the narrative poll. Yeah. Yeah. It's one poll. If tomorrow we see a poll that comes out having the 2 parties tied across the province, I would probably give the PCs the win. So I could imagine them out beating their polls. The vote efficiency works in their favor again. So a PC majority. To me, in New Brunswick, more likely than a NDP majority in Saskatchewan or a tie in either BC or in New Brunswick. So what do you want? A couple ties or a Saskatchewan NDP majority government?
These are the 3 options left, and I have 2 of them. I will leave you the last choice. I'm very sorry.
Which will be the winner, as we know.
As we know, it's from experience, from precedent. I'm very sorry, NDPers in Saskatchewan. I think Carla Beck had a pretty good debate the other night. I think they have they improved their standings if we go by the polls, but ties in BC and New Brunswick are more likely than an NDP win. So I'm gonna take 2 ties, and if I have to rank them, I'm gonna take New Brunswick tie and then BC tie. And then you're left with the last pick.
And as experience tells, it's going to be the winner. So Saskatchewan NDP is going to form a majority government. I will choose that with my last pick. It's a prospect. Might not be ready to hit the ice this year, but maybe in 4 maybe in 4 years the Saskatchewan NDP could win that majority government. So that's what we got. So what do I got? Let's go over it.
One thing is certain, you will be right in Saskatchewan.
Yes.
That's right. I did not have
at least 1 point in the bank. So you need to win. You need to win in Brunswick. And,
wow.
Yeah. So what do I got? For Saskatchewan, I got a Sask Party majority. I got a Liberal minority in New Brunswick, a PC minority in New Brunswick, a Conservative majority in BC, a PC majority in New Brunswick, and an NDP majority in Saskatchewan. And you have a BC NDP majority, a New Brunswick Liberal majority, so you're big on the majorities, BC NDP minority, BC Conservative minority, and ties in New Brunswick and British Columbia. So you're pretty all in majority governments for BC and New Brunswick, or minorities in BC. You got both minorities on the table in British Columbia.
And I have both ties, which would be extremely funny. Let's be honest here. I mean, if
I only have one BC, my only BC is a Conservative majority, so that's the only outcome I got going for me in British Columbia.
There you go.
Which means I don't think I'm getting 2 points. We'll see.
Well, here's the thing, though. What's the funniest outcome? The NDP pulls out a big surprise in Saskatchewan, and both provinces end up being tied. So,
that would be something. That would be a hell of a week.
It would be the last 3 picks of our draft. Anyway, so we'll revisit that. Well, next week we'll have a good idea. But if the Saskatchewan decides the winner of this, we'll have the final tally in early November. So.
Okay, we'll go to the mailbag. We're going to answer one question for the public episode and a few questions for the Patreon-only episode. Note to listeners, we are going to be changing things up next week. We'll have more about that next week. But for now, if you want to listen to the mailbag, you can join the Patreon at thenumberspod.ca. So AJ Bounce on Discord, he says, if it looks like Trudeau will be pushed down, does that increase the chances that the NDP roll the dice to face the known opponent? Are they too election unready at the moment? What are your thoughts?
Okay. I'm curious to know your thoughts, but I will say this. It depends on if Trudeau is pushed out, for the Liberals will have to prorogue, to have time, to not be surprised, not for the government to fall with the leaderless Liberals. So I would answer this once we know who the Liberal leader is. If the Liberal leader is somebody who's known to be like center-left, the NDP would have more competition. But you just mentioned earlier in the spot that Christy Clark, moderate right-of-center Premier of BC, could the NDP see an opening with a right-leaning Liberal leader? Maybe. It's just that the polls are still not good for the NDP. The polls, the NDP will not make any gains unless they have a superb campaign, and the Liberals completely tanked during the campaign. To answer your question, AJ, and I'm curious to know what Éric thinks, but there's no advantage for the NDP to go now because they would get slaughtered and they would be in a Conservative majority for 4 years. So they wouldn't have no say of what's going on in Ottawa. Éric, how do you see it?
Well, to me, there's two scenarios. One is if Trudeau does resign or say he's going to step down, I think that the likely outcome would be a prorogation to avoid a confidence vote in the House while they're in the midst of a leadership race. So I don't think the NDP would have the chance in this scenario. Yeah. There's not really anything in the calendar that would allow a confidence vote that quickly. So I think that if there is prorogation, I think it becomes moot. I think that there will be a throne speech and the government likely falls on the throne speech at the return of Parliament, whenever that would be. If instead the Liberals decide they don't want to prorogue, but there is a leadership race going on, then I could easily see the NDP saying, you know what, this government is too concerned with its own party politics. We're going to vote against it. So I think that to avoid a defeat in the midst of a leadership race, I think the Liberals would have to prorogue. I think it would be way too risky not to do that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it is more dependent on what the Liberals decide to do than what the NDP does. Because I think either way, probably an election after a throne speech or government falls in the midst of a leadership race just for maximum chaos. Why not, right? Why not? If you're the NDP, that would give you something.
Éric, has that happened before? Has a major party been thrown into an election during a leadership campaign or a leaderless party? I know, I mean, the BC Social Credit didn't have a leader, but that's in the 50s. Is there another example of a government falling while they don't have a leader?
The 1980 election is sort of that, because Pierre Trudeau had already signaled he was going to resign. The leadership race hadn't really started. I think some people had started kicking the tires and getting a campaign ready.
Yeah, it's true.
But he had announced he was stepping down. The government fell, and for the first few days, it wasn't clear whether he was going to lead the party or not into the campaign. So it has happened before, and if it happened this time, I think it would mean that Justin Trudeau would have to lead the Liberals. He would still be the leader, unless they could maybe do an emergency move up of the leadership vote in the midst.
It would be
a
hell.
Mess.
It would be a huge mess. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's move to some of the Patreon questions. All right. Number of the week. Do you have?
Yes, I have two, plus 15 and plus 30. These are the approval numbers for both leaders of parties in Saskatchewan. Scott Moe is a plus 15, 54% approval, 39% disapproval. And Miss Beck, I know she's a bit less known, but she has a plus 58 and a minus 28 for a net score of plus 30. Whatever you think of the politics of New Brunswick, clearly many voters, respect and enjoy the party leaders there, which is not the case in many places in the country, including my home province of Quebec. So I thought it was interesting that both Mr. Moe and Miss Beck are mostly seen favorably by the Saskatchewan electorate.
And that was in the Research Co poll, I believe.
That's right.
Is that
Research
correct?
Co. Yeah.
Right. I also have two numbers, and they're very simple: 47, 25. Majority thresholds in British Columbia and New Brunswick. The most important numbers that we'll be looking for on Sunday and Monday night. And you can join us for those live streams. As I said, they'll be starting on Sunday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Hopefully it'll go quick. We're not going to stay all night. We'll have to go to bed by 2 a.m. We're not going to kill ourselves. We're too old for that now. And then on Monday, it'll be starting at 7 p.m. Much more civilized time. So join us for those live streams on the YouTube channel. And also, if you're listening to this on the Patreon or on the RIT podcast feed, go and follow the numbers feed in Apple, in Spotify, in any of those things, because we're going to be starting to put out more public episodes, and they'll primarily be available on those platforms. So just go do that ahead of time, and you'll save yourself some hassle. So we're going to be chatting three more times.
Oh, yeah.
2 more times over the weekend. Boy, we had lunch, and now we're going to see each other twice in the next few days. We're going to be sick of each other. We're going to have to take a break afterwards. I don't think that's possible. I could never get sick of you.
No. It's going to be
so much, Philippe.
It's going to be fun.
And, yeah, we'll chat in a couple days.
Merci beaucoup, Éric. Thank you, everybody. And talk to you this weekend.